Welcome back to week 18 of our podcast. Wow, have these gone by fast. We've talked about the foundations of music. We've talked about the Renaissance period and the medieval period when it came to music. We're just wrapping out the Renaissance, and I thought a great way to wrap up the Renaissance in this year is to talk about music and early European colonialism. This episode is going to be nice and short, and so we might as well just jump into it. So this is music and early European colonialism. In introducing the Renaissance, we echoed the words of a historian who saw it in the discovery of the world and of man, but we have not yet said much about the world part of this formulation. The period from 1480 to 1620 marks the first great phase of European expansion into other parts of the world. The most famous European voyages of exploration and conquest took place during these years. To be sure, other amazing travels had been undertaken earlier by non-Europeans. In the early 14th century, by the great Islamic scholar and explorer Ibn Battuta, who ranged through North and West Africa and much of Asia, and in the 15th century by the Chinese navigator Cheng Ho, who guided large fleets through South Asian waters all the way to Africa. But from the late 15th century on, the lead in exploration shifted to European nations. The Portuguese seaman Bartolomeu Dias sailed around the southern tip of Africa in the years 1487 and 88. A decade later, his countryman Vasco da Gama extended his route all the way to India, opening a new passage to the East Indies. In 1492, Columbus, aiming for the East Indies, instead stumbled onto the Caribbean island he called Hispaniola. Trade routes to this new world were quickly established, so quickly that from 1492, only 1 year passed without European journeys to the Americas. Then, in 1519 to 21, the expedition of Ferdinand Magellan circumnavigated the globe. The expedition is a reminder of how risky such voyages were. Magellan himself was killed in the South Seas, and only 18 of the 270 crew member who started out made it back to Spain. The voyages of exploration were so more than sheer adventurism or innocent trading ventures. They were also expeditions of military conquest and territorial expansion. They marked the beginning of an aggressive European colonization of large portions of the rest of the world that would last almost half a millennium, well into the 1900s, and would profoundly shape the modern world. Cultural conquests and music. The European attempt to conquer was cultural as well as military. In the immediate wake of European soldiers and conquistadors came missionaries aiming to convert the native peoples to Christian beliefs, whether by patient persuasion or forcible coercion. Wherever they went, soldiers, missionaries, and merchants reported the novelties they found back to a fascinated Europe. These reports sometimes praised other ways of life, but more often condemned them. Some were precise and accurate, others largely fanciful. The reports were often made room for descriptions of music. They inform us of musical traditions that today are at least much changed and, in many cases, simply extinct. We read an account from an Incan harvest festival high in the Andes in 1535, with full days of singing timed to the waxing and waning of the sun. We follow the spiritual songs of the Tupi Indians of Brazil and the song contests in which their war captives taunted them until they were killed and eaten. The great Renaissance essayist Michel de Montaigne read these same accounts and wrote them in his most famous essay of cannibals. From the 1590s comes a description of African music in the Congo. English mariners report on native North American song and dance, and Dutch explorers tell about the elaborate gong orchestras, or gamelans, still played today in Indonesia. From around the same time come the reports of Chinese music by the remarkable Jesuit Matteo Ricci, the first European allowed to reside in the imperial capital of Beijing. He is scandalized by the traveling troops that perform Chinese operas, a curse in the empire, in his views, more prone to vice than any other activity. Music of the Aztecs. Outstripping all these in volume and detail are the reports we have from the 1500s on native Mexican or Aztec music. The Aztec Empire was the first great civilization Europeans came upon in the New World. It fascinated them not only with its cultural attainments and complexity, its riches, and its beautiful capital of Tenochtitlan, floating in the middle of Lake Texcoco, but also with the horrors of its religion involving human sacrifice and ritual cannibalism. To missionaries, the native Mexicans posed the first great systemic challenge of religious conversion in the New World. They studied Aztec culture with great care in order to know how best to achieve their goal. A Spanish missionary in 1530 writes, "Songs and dances were very important in all this land. They were used both to celebrate the solemn festivals of the demons they honored as gods and for their own enjoyment and recreation. The singers decided some days before the festivals what they would sing. If there were to be songs and dances, they gathered in advance, so there would be no more imperfections on the festival day. On the morning of that day, they put a large mat in the middle of the plaza where they set up their drums. When they are ready to start the dance, 3 or 4 Indians blow very lively whistles. Then they play the drums quietly, growing louder little by little. Hearing the drums have begun, the people all listen to the song and start to dance. The first songs are sung quietly and slowly. Each verse or couplet is repeated 3 or 4 times, and the song is so well tuned that the singing, drums, and dance all stay together. Having finished one song, the pitch of the drum is changed. Then the singing masters begin another song, a little higher and livelier than the one before it. From the hour of vespers until night-time, the songs and dances get more and more lively and higher in pitch, and the playing more and more graceful." From this and other accounts, we know that the most important ceremonial music of the Mexicans took the form of drum songs with dancing to celebrate the demons they honored as gods, as the missionaries put it. The use of music for worship is very widespread, as we've already shown between sacred chant with the indigenous Polynesians and Muslims. The words for some of the Mexican songs in their native language, Nahuatl, were written down by missionaries and others and have come down to us. The music, though, is completely lost.